Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to First Parish Brewster. If you are visiting for the first time, I'd like to invite you to make your way to the visitors table, which I think is outside now because it's a beautiful day. So please be sure to stop there and we can tell you more about the congregation, and stay for coffee hour. We'd love to have you. If you would like to be in an area with masks, it's in the back over there, which everyone who sits in that area wears a mask, if that would feel safer to you. I have a few announcements. One is somebody left their keys on that back table over there, and it's probably going to, what? Yay, Judy! All right, here are your keys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. The other announcement I have this morning is everyone, if you are on our mailing list, was sent something in an email about Article 2, which Article 2 is this aspect of Unitarian Universalism. We're voting on kind of including our 7 principles, but now moving into this idea around values in particular. And we sent something out to get your feedback on it so we know what our delegates at General Assembly are going to vote on, whether or not we want to move in this direction or not. And I have been told by our esteemed president that not many of you have answered this survey. So, when you get home, could you look for the email, pull it up, and answer the survey? All right? Oh, the angle. Sorry. In the angle, there is a piece about Article 2. Yep? Okay. I invite you to take your cell phones out and turn them off, please, so you're present with us. And take a deep breath with me in now. And let us be present together in worship. I woke you up. Good morning. As many of you know, the first Sunday after Labor Day weekend, we often have water communion, right? You come in, you are asked to gather some water from the summer, and we do a big communion kind of around it. It's your summer assignment of sorts. Yes? Yes. Okay, I'm going to shake it up this year, all right? It is a wonderful ritual, but I'm going to ask you to do something else instead. You have a different spiritual assignment this summer. I want you to find a string or a rope that represents one of your lifelines to renewal. I'm going to explain this a little better. Parker Palmer, who's a Quaker theologian, tells this story about farmers in the Midwest and what happened to them when blizzards would come in. They had all known of fellow farmers who, when the blizzard came, they got lost in the blizzard and couldn't even make their way home. So what they would often do when a storm was coming, they would put a rope to the barn, to the house, so in a whiteout, they could make their way home. Now, that was kind of like a literal lifeline, right? And I know it's summer and nor'easters are always away from us, right? But there are modern day blizzards that we contend with all the time. Emotional and social blizzards. Modern day blizzards of economic injustice and ecological ruin. Physical and spiritual violence. There are things like fear and frenzy and greed and deceit, and indifference of its own kind is a kind of blizzard. And we often think of First Parish as someplace that we come back and we have friendships that are renewed here, or we get intellectual stimulation. But in truth, in the last year, I have seen more times than not the ways that all of you save and transform one another through pain. You are lifelines for one another in this community. And you, in that way, rescue one another when the blizzards come our way and you're renewed. So it's not just church that has that, but you all have that in your individual lives, right? Those things that renew you, bring you back to yourself or community or the larger world. That's what I'm asking you to find, a string or a rope that connects you and renews you to life. So you may choose something like a vine from your garden. You may choose something like the ribbon that was on your daughter's wedding bouquet. You may choose something like a shoelace from hiking boots that brought you back to life with beauty and joy. It renewed you. So, Homecoming Sunday, which is September 8th this year, I'm inviting you to bring your string. You have all summer to work on your assignment, okay? It's not due next week. You got this? Okay. And then we're going to bring it back and we're going to have a ritual around all of you sharing your individual pieces. I am going to remind you about this all summer. I have 2 postcards that are going out to you, okay? You're going to get stuff in the angle that comes to you. You'll get an email to remind you. When you have found your piece, if you're interested, I would love to have you email me with what it is and why you picked it. All right? In the meantime, I want you to dive in and have fun. It's fun homework. All right? Welcome to our celebration of life. It is so good to be with all of you this morning. Before we sing our first hymn, would you please rise and greet your neighbor this morning? Please join in singing hymn number 361, I believe it is. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Thank you. I love that hymn, but it's a hard one to sing like, enter, rejoice. We light this morning's chalice with these words. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for hope and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Please join with me in our affirmation words. We believe in love.
Love is the doctrine of this church.
We believe in truth.
The quest for truth is the sacrament.
We believe in helping others.
And service is our prayer.
We believe in the sacredness of life.
To the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine.
This is a time in our service where we offer our heartfelt gratitude to organizations in our community that share our values, organizations both local, sometimes statewide, and every now and then internationally. This morning's offering is a split plate with the Conservation Law Foundation. For 50 years, CLF has taken on powerful opponents who would pollute our air and water and squander our resources. Their deep local knowledge, legal acumen, and policy expertise make them prime movers in building our clean energy future, countering climate change, and safeguarding our communities. Let us remember that the religious person is the grateful person is the generous person. We'll now take the offering mindfully and gratefully. invite you into a time of meditation and prayer, followed by some shared silence. Please get comfortable in your seat. Place your feet firmly on the ground. And turn inward with me now. Sometimes all it takes to renew our faith is to look around. We come, each and every one of us, all too aware of the power that worry and pain and trouble and loss have over our attention. There's not one of us here without a burden weighing us down. And who of us wouldn't lean into the person next to us and accept a hug if invited right at this very moment to do so? When we carry these troubles, they can obstruct our view. And yet, when we gather, we are comforted and reminded that while good guys and good gals don't always win, grace and beauty are always too plentiful for the darkness to ever completely shut goodness out. So this morning, friends, let us give thanks for friends who reach out with perfect timing and a kindness that reminds us that we're never truly alone. For music that soothes and reconnects us to hope in a way that words simply can't. For the smile of a neighbor, the laughter of a spouse, the giggle of a grandchild, the chortle of a fellow parishioner. Let us, friends, give thanks. Some say religion is a crutch. We know what they mean, of course. None of us want our religion to be soft-minded or prevent us from looking at the true brutality of life. And so often we too echo this criticism of religion being only for the weak. But friends, in the soft stillness of this moment, let us all confess our need to lean into one another and have at least one place in our lives we don't have to pretend we can stand on our own. Because you are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone. In the silence we now share, may we sit with that gratitude and let it wash over us anew. May the silence we have shared continue to hold and heal us all. Amen. readings for you this morning. The first comes from the poet Naomi Shihad Nye, and the poem's called Kindness. She writes this: before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop, the passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. For you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you. How he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out in the day to mail letters and bake bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. Second poem I want to share with you is a poem by the poet Stephen Dunn. It's called Sweetness. Just when it has seemed I couldn't bear one more friend walking with a tumor, one more maniac with a perfect reason, often a sweetness has come and changed nothing in the world except the way I stumble through it. For a while lost in the ignorance of loving someone or something, the world shrank to mouth size, hand size, and never seeming small. I acknowledge there is no sweetness that doesn't leave a stain, no sweetness that's ever sufficiently sweet. Tonight, a friend called to say his lover was killed in a car he was driving. His voice was low and guttural. He repeated what he needed to repeat, and I repeated the one or two words we have for such grief until we were only speaking in tones. Often, a sweetness comes as if on loan, just stays long enough to make sense of what it means to be alive, then returns to its dark source. As for me, I don't care where it's been or what bitter road it's traveled to come so far, to taste so good. Here ends this morning's readings. As some of you know, I lead small groups called Soul Matters groups. They're like a spiritual deepening small group. And I often take notes when everybody's participating. I have years of notes that I've taken. And sometimes when I have a topic like this, I remember something that someone said in one of our groups together, and I was rifling through things, and I found exactly what someone said in one of the small groups once. They said, "During my darkest time, learning that there was a kindness was what kept me going on." I wonder sometimes if we understand the significance of that this morning and let it sink into us. Because in our culture, kindness is kind of quaint, right? It's cute. It's not really significant. Fodder for sentimental stories told to children, not the serious business of serious adults like all of us. Aren't you all serious? And more than that, at its worst, our culture considers kindness a weakness. Ruthlessness is what gets one ahead, what keeps one safe. Nevertheless, here it is, that simple and beautiful line, proof that no matter how mocked and laughed at, kindness is something more, something far more than cute. And I wonder this morning how often we really, really get that. When I found that quote, I had stapled on something that I had wrote to it. It's a "this I believe" statement, and here's what I wrote. I believe that nothing works and nobody survives unless there is a kindness. I believe that despite the great pain and deep wounds in each of our lives, the vast majority of us stay afloat, not miraculously, but naturally, due to the dozens of tiny kindnesses that we are gifted with each day. I believe that the kindness we offer others makes the difference between life and death in ways we, the givers, will never, ever know. And I believe that all of this is very easy to forget. At least I know it's something I too easily forget. And it's not, I really tell myself, because I'm cruel or callous or inherently sinful. It's just that, like most of humanity, I'm more fragile and easily wounded than I really want to admit. Life's disappointments and setbacks overwhelm all of us sometimes, making it all too easy to wallow in our self-pity, convincing ourselves that we are unique victims of generosity withheld. And when we feel that life and others are not generous to us, why, we ask, should we be kind and generous with others? Out of our hurt, we become stingy. Because of our pain, we withhold tenderness. Bearing witness to the vileness of public life in the public square, at times we lash out, not in kindness, or we retreat, actually, in worry and isolation. And then, of course, there's that swirl, that flurry of life's demands and responsibilities that leaves us dizzy and disoriented, so tired and tugged in 1,000 different directions that we no longer seem able to notice the need for kindness, even when it is right in front of us. When your nose is buried in things to do, you, in effect, can feel blind. When you've got to pick up the kids in 15 minutes or visit one more doctor or call back the insurance agent who keeps telling you you've sent in the wrong information, in the end, there's simply not a lot of room left in your schedule for kindness. And frankly, none of this would really matter that much, this forgetting, this emotional stinginess, if it weren't for the pain that is omnipresent around us all the time. I was at First Unitarian in Rochester for 13 years, and the minister before me had been there for 30 years. And when you are giving your last sermon, right, you're probably going through all 30 years of everything you've done. Like, what do I want these people to hold on to? What's most important? And this is what Dick Gilbert chose to say to that congregation. Said, people are precious and in more pain than you can see, so be gentle with them. Our lives are like fragile eggs, so handle them with care. Handle them with exceeding care. For there are human beings within, human beings who feel as we feel, who hurt as we hurt, who hunger for joy as much as we do. Therefore, since we know how it is to be hurt by others, since we know how important it is to be respected and loved, we all need to be a little kinder than necessary. I want you to think about that for a moment. It's amazing, really. After 30 years, after hundreds of sermons that he had given, Dick chose to highlight what he decided to leave that congregation with was a reminder about pain, about the pervasive hurt and fragility that's woven through all of our lives. That, I hope you realize, it's huge. Here's a man whose life's work, really, was to wrestle with what it means to be a church, what it means to be human, what it means to be close to the holy. And at the end, he answered the question by calling us to pay attention and let our actions be guided by each other's pain. This is not a vision that depicts kindness as cute and quaint, it seems to me, as some little like bonus in the midst of your day. It's the farthest thing, actually, from cute and quaint one could imagine. It's a vision that is trying to wake us up to the fact that our acts of kindness involve us in the most sacred of all dramas, the drama that enables life to go on. Or as Naomi Nye puts it so wonderfully in that poem, right? She says we are being asked to wake up and realize that kindness is what ties our shoes in the morning, sends us out to get the letters, and purchase bread. And if that doesn't make sense or sound like a big deal to you, then center yourself and think about it again. Do what Naomi Nye suggested. Think of a time in your life, actually, when you lost things, when the future, as she put it, dissolved in a moment like salt. Think about a time in your life when the precious thing you held in your hand or the precious person that held you was suddenly gone. Think about how hard it was that even to imagine wanting to tie your shoes or mail a letter or purchase bread. And yet we do, right? Despite the hurt and wounds, betrayals and loss, we get up every day and we tie our shoes and go on. And why? Why are we able actually to do that? Well, because as Dick and Naomi Nye and Stephen Dunn are trying to tell us on some deep and fundamental level, we trust, actually, in the kindness of strangers and friends. We know inside it renews us and it brings us back to life. Many years ago, in my early 20s, it was many years ago now, sadly. No, not really sadly. I like being where I'm at, actually. But many years ago, I was in Colorado, and my first husband was in graduate school, and I was what they call, like the sole breadwinner, basically. And I was doing a very poor job of being the sole breadwinner. I had a job. It didn't pay very much money. And it was super stressful. We were barely making it. And I did not, for the life of me, want to call up either one of our parents. So I kind of dug into this, like, barely subsiding kind of existence for a while. One day, I went out to go get the mail, and my neighbor, who is a very lovely person but kind of standoffish, was walking her dog at the same time, and she ran into me, and for whatever reason, I think I was kind of ill at ease or in that moment of like cracking open, and I told her about everything that was going on, and she says to me, "I'm so sorry, that must be hard." It was hard. We finished chatting, and then she walked home with her little dachshund named Bob. 2 days later, I came home from a long commute, and I walked to the back, to the back of our house, and on the stairs to our apartment were 2 huge bags of groceries. Just big bags of groceries. And it had a note that said, "You needed some really good food," she said. And she signed her name. It is said people will forget what you said and what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. I can't remember that woman's name for the life of me. I do remember the dog Bob, but I don't, that's a little pathetic, but I don't remember her name. But I know how she buoyed me up, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. Why is that? You get choked up about something like that. And I keep coming back to that line in Stephen Dunn's poem, the one that says, "Often a sweetness has come and changed nothing in the world except the way that I stumble through it." My neighbor's act of kindness didn't change the world around me, but it most certainly altered the way I stumbled through it. Her simple act affected me more than just my relationship with her. It altered my relationship with life itself. It made the world feel like a safe place to stumble through, even if the potholes and blurry path remained exactly the same as it was before. The whole thing reminds me, as I hope it reminds all of you, that our ability to be kind gives us not simply the ability to brighten someone's day, but the ability to renew each other's faith that the universe is a generous and trustworthy place, which in turn enables us to get up and keep stumbling through it. And I think we got to admit at this point that this is kind of a fairly foreign idea when it comes to Unitarian Universalism and our tradition, especially because of the dominance of the Unitarian side of our tradition, which for the last couple hundred years has looked not to kindness, but to reason to get us through. Our members have historically said they come to church for intellectual stimulation. The goal of our worship has not been so much to build one's character or moral realignment, but rather the cultivation of our ever-discriminating minds. It's the cultivated mind we've put most often our faith and trust in to help us negotiate the challenges and complexities of life. And yet part of the reason I am giving this sermon today is that I believe we all, to some degree or another, have reached a point where we feel that this discriminating mind is simply not enough. And that's not to say that we don't value our brains. Not one of us wants to be part of a religion that asks us to leave our questioning intellect at the door. But what makes being a Unitarian Universalist in this time and place so exciting, I think, is because we've become wise enough to realize that in addition to having impressive brains, which you all have, by the way, there is so much more that we want and need. A number of years ago, I came across this wonderful play called Wit that was on Broadway for a while, and then they made a movie out of it. And it won the Pulitzer Prize for it. Its central character is this woman named Vivian Baring. She's a renowned scholar and professor of philosophy and English literature. Her specialty is the metaphysical love sonnets of John Donne, considered the most complex and intellectually challenging poems in the entire English canon. She is considered by colleagues and students alike a master of the life of the mind. So the play begins with her being diagnosed with late stages of ovarian cancer. And from the start, both we and she knows that she's going to die. But because she is tough and a scholar, she agrees to undergo this radical kind of experiential chemotherapy for research's sake, a chance to make, as she puts it, one last contribution to knowledge. It will be difficult, the doctors tell her, emotionally as well as physically. That's okay, says Vivian. I know all about life and death. After all, I am a scholar. And as the play progresses, Vivian's toughness and sure-footedness slowly dissipates. She is treated kind of by a lot of the staff as not much more than a lab rat. And this sterile treatment and her growing need for comfort precipitate an epiphany about both her doctors and herself. She says, the doctors are like me. They prefer research to humanity. So this pivotal moment kind of sets off a chain of flashbacks in which she revisits moments during her distinguished career where her love of abstract debate and intellectual precision caused her to ignore completely real human pain. So it sounds pretty depressing, right? And yet what Vivian does with that kind of tragic realization ironically causes the play not to end with our watching a teacher die, but with our being taught something very valuable by that teacher dying. After one final flashback, we see her all alone kind of thinking, and then she starts crying. And she calls for a nurse to come in, and it's this nurse, the one nurse that has been tender with her. And she says to the nurse, "I'm scared. I'm really scared." And the nurse takes her hand and holds on to her, and she says, "Oh, honey, of course you are." And Vivian says to her, "I don't feel so sure of myself anymore." To which the nurse replies, "And you're used to feeling sure, aren't you?" Vivian nods. "I used to feel so sure," says Vivian. And then she's really crying. And the nurse hands her some tissues, and she says, "I'll be right back." And she leaves, and she comes back with a popsicle. One of those popsicles that you can break in two and share with someone. And the nurse tells her the story of like how she was always so elated as a kid when that sound of that ice cream truck came around. We all know that sound, right? She'd get very excited because she'd always get that popsicle, split it, and share it with her friend. So the two of them are sitting holding hands and having a popsicle. And then the nurse leaves, and Vivian says this, "Well, that certainly was a maudlin display. Popsicles, for heaven's sakes, I can't believe my life has become so corny. But it can't be helped. I don't see any other way. We are discussing life and death. Actually, we're discussing my life and death, and I can't conceive of any other tone. Now is not the time for verbal wordplay, for unlikely flights of the imagination and wildly shifting perspectives, for metaphysical conceit, for wit. And nothing would be worse than a detailed scholarly analysis. Erudition, interpretation, complication. Now is the time for simplicity. Now is the time for, dare I say it, kindness. I thought being extremely smart would take care of it. But now I see that I have been found out." There's an old joke about a Unitarian dying, and he goes up to heaven. And he gets there, and there's like two paths and two different signs. One says, "This way to heaven." The other says, "This way to a discussion about heaven." And without a beat, the Unitarian takes the discussion about heaven. So smarts and discussion, no doubt, are essential and a sacred part of being human. But it seems to me that what makes us most human is the wisdom to know when to choose the discussion and when to choose the real thing, knowing when is the time for wit and when is the time for kindness. And remembering through all of it that famous old piece of wisdom that actually the title of the sermon comes from William Wordsworth. The best portion of a good person's life is their little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and love. May it be so. Amen. Would you please join in singing our final hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us. And rise as you are willing and able. Please join hands for the closing words. We are having coffee hour outside. Whatever we can do or dream we can do, let us begin it. Boldness has genius and power and magic in it. My friends, may we ever be bold in our living and in our loving. Can I hear an amen? Amen. Amen.